I was screaming his name so loud, I couldn't hear myself cry. Adam. Adam. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. We were standing on the cliffs in Big Sur, California. Just the two of us.
The ocean was wild that day.
The wind was strong, but not enough to blow someone over. Or at least, that's what I thought. It happened so fast. Adam had walked a few steps ahead. He wanted to take a photo of the rocks below. He looked back at me and smiled, then turned around and took one more step and slipped. He just vanished. 1 second, he was there, the next he was gone. No scream. No sound. Just the ocean, crashing far below. I ran toward the edge. I dropped everything, my phone, my bag, even my shoes. I dropped to my knees and leaned over, trying to see anything. His jacket, his hand, a glimpse of him. But all I saw was water. I screamed his name again. 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 A couple nearby heard me yelling and rushed over. One of them held me while the other called 911. I could barely speak. I was shaking so hard I couldn't feel my legs. It took rescue teams almost 40 minutes to arrive. By then, the sun had started to set. The water was darker now, harder to search. They asked me questions, but I don't even remember what I said. They looked for hours. Nobody. No sign of him. Not even his phone or jacket. A ranger wrapped me in a silver emergency blanket. I sat on a rock, holding myself. I was still wearing the hoodie he gave me the night before, the one from our Monterey stop. It still smelled like him. They told me the current was strong down there, that it happens sometimes, that the ocean takes people and doesn't give them back. I just nodded. I couldn't even cry anymore. It didn't feel real. We had only been married 20 days. We were supposed to have our whole lives ahead. This was our honeymoon.
Now,
I was alone on a cliff, staring into the sea, wondering how I would ever breathe again. I'm Layla Cruz. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Sacramento, California. I own a small but successful restaurant just outside Midtown. It used to be my dad's before he passed away 4 years ago. He built it from the ground up, and when I took it over, I promised I'd never let it fall apart. For a while, that restaurant was my whole life. I worked 6 days a week. I missed the holidays. I canceled birthdays. But after 3 years of nonstop effort, I finally got it running smoothly. I even bought the building we're in. It was the first time I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. I wasn't really looking for love. I didn't have time. But then, I met Adam. He came into my restaurant one afternoon and sat near the window with a laptop. Said he liked quiet places to work. Said my food reminded him of his mom's cooking. He had this calm energy. He listened more than he talked. He started showing up twice a week. Then every other day, we started talking. First about books. Then about our lives. Then about dreams. He told me he worked in commercial design and handled contracts for building interiors. He even helped me redesign the front section of the restaurant for free. Said it was a gift. We fell fast. I know how that sounds. But when you've spent so long doing everything on your own, having someone finally stand beside you feels different. He made me feel safe.
Seen.
Like I didn't have to be strong all the time. 3 months after we met, he proposed in front of the restaurant during our closing shift. All the lights were off except the ones over our table. I said yes.
Of course I said yes.
We planned a small wedding in Lake Tahoe with just close friends. After that, we packed up my Jeep and took off for a 2-week honeymoon down the California coast. We laughed the entire drive to Big Sur. We played old music, stayed in small inns, and shared French fries on beaches. I don't know how to explain it, but Adam made life feel like it finally made sense. We were just 20 days into our marriage, but he talked like we had decades ahead of us. He kept saying things like, "This is just the beginning," and "Imagine what our kids will say when they hear how we started." Every night on the honeymoon, we made small plans, tiny dreams. He wanted to help me open a second location for the restaurant. He even showed me a spot in Carmel he said had soul. He said I worked too hard and promised I wouldn't have to do it all alone anymore. We would sit on motel balconies at night, wrapped in the same blanket, watching the sky change color as the wind rolled in off the coast. He told me I was his calm, his safe place, his forever. I believed him. That morning in Big Sur, he held my hand while we walked through the trees. We joked about getting old together, about building a garden, about driving a beat-up RV across the country when we were tired. He said he'd drive and I'd DJ. We reached the cliffs just before noon. The sky was so blue, it didn't look real. He told me to wait while he walked a little closer to get a picture of the sea arch. I watched him step forward, just a little too far. And then he was gone.
Just like that.
One slip. 1 second.
Gone.
At first, I thought he was joking. That he'd pop back up and laugh. That it was one of those dumb pranks. But he didn't come back. I remember falling to the ground, screaming his name, my heart racing like it wanted to leap out of my chest and go after him. That night, I curled up in bed alone in a motel by the highway. The same room we had shared the night before. His toothbrush was still in the sink, his shoes near the door. But the room felt hollow. I stared at the ceiling, shaking, numb. How could someone feel like home? And then be gone before the next sunset? 20 days. That's how long I was married. 20 days of thinking I had found the person I'd spend my whole life with, before it all shattered into silence. The morning after the memorial, I sat in the kitchen for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't move. I just stared at the table where Adam and I used to sit, drinking coffee and planning our next step. There had been no body, just an empty space where my husband used to be. The rescue team called it a presumed drowning, and the case was closed. I thought I'd feel peace after the memorial, but I didn't. Something about the whole thing felt unfinished, like he had just disappeared, not died. And then the phone rang. "Hi, is this Mrs. Cruz?" the voice asked. It took me a second to answer. "Yes. My name is Kevin Bennett. I'm a probate attorney based in Sacramento. I'm reaching out regarding the estate of Adam Cruz. I'm so sorry for your loss." I gripped the phone tighter. Why are you calling me?" He continued. "Adam filed a will shortly before your wedding. I'd like to meet with you to go over a few documents regarding the transfer of property." I blinked. "A will?" I said softly. "He never mentioned anything to me." "He submitted it just 3 weeks ago," Mr. Bennett said gently. "It includes instructions for his business and personal assets. It also names you as a signatory." I paused. That didn't sound like Adam. We had only been married for 20 days. We hadn't even finished updating our banking details together. Why would he file a will without telling me? I agreed to meet him the next day. The office was small and quiet, tucked into an old building downtown. Mr. Bennett greeted me with sympathy and handed me a folder. I opened it and saw Adam's name, the date, and a list of assets, including the building that housed my restaurant. Adam requested sole control of the property be transferred in the event of his death, Mr. Bennett said. "Everything here looks valid, and your signature is included." I stared at the line he pointed to. There it was, my name, my signature. I didn't remember signing this. But I didn't say that out loud.
Not yet.
The lawyer went on, explaining the next steps. He said things like ownership reassignment and title transfer while my mind buzzed. Why would Adam do this? We shared everything. We had just started our life. Why would he want it all in his name? I nodded through the rest of the meeting, but I couldn't focus. I walked out into the parking lot holding that folder like it was a brick. That night, I didn't sleep. Something wasn't right. I just didn't know what yet. I wasn't ready to go back to the restaurant, but I forced myself anyway. People needed paychecks. The kitchen needed orders. Life doesn't pause just because your heart is broken. I told my staff I needed a few days off for personal reasons. They were kind, too kind. Every look felt like pity. I hated it. I went into the office to catch up on paperwork. That's when I saw it. The main business account was lower than I remembered. Way lower. I blinked. Refreshed the page. $75,000 was missing. My hands started to sweat. I opened the transaction history and looked line by line. There were two large transfers, $35,000 and $40,000, sent to a name I didn't recognize. J. Wallace Holdings. No memo. No attached invoice. Just two wire transfers done through our online banking access, both approved 3 days after Adam's death. My heart dropped. Adam was the only other person who had the password. I sat there staring at the screen for minutes. I kept hoping I had made a mistake, that it was some vendor or property expense I forgot. But I knew every single transaction that went through this business. This wasn't right. I called the bank. Can you confirm who authorized those wire transfers?
I asked.
According to our records, the rep said they were processed using your login. My login? I whispered. Are you sure?
Yes.
The transfers came from your online profile. The access came from an IP address in Sacramento. I hung up and felt my hands shaking. Something didn't add up. I told myself it was stress. That maybe Adam set up an automated transfer before we left for the honeymoon. That maybe it was part of a renovation deal I forgot we talked about. But deep down, I felt that tight pull in my chest. That sense that something was off, and I just hadn't put the pieces together yet. I went through our documents at home. Adam's laptop was gone. His briefcase too. But everything else was still there. His clothes, shoes, even the cologne he sprayed on every morning. None of it made sense. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed we used to share, holding the wedding photo I had framed in my nightstand. I missed him. God, I missed him. But I couldn't ignore the voice in the back of my mind anymore. What if this wasn't just a tragedy? What if something else was going on? I don't know what I expected to find. I wasn't even sure I believed what I was chasing. But when I traced the wire transfers through the bank, I found something strange, an address tied to the recipient's business registration. It wasn't in California. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. That name again, J. Wallace Holdings. The business was newly registered, just a few weeks old, and it had Adam's birthday listed on the owner profile. I stared at the screen, trying to breathe. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was someone using his information. Maybe. But the voice in my head wouldn't shut up. So, I booked a one-way flight to Atlanta. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I packed light, just enough for a few days. I told my assistant at the restaurant I was going away for personal healing. That wasn't a lie. But what I was really doing was chasing a shadow. I landed late at night. The city felt unfamiliar, too loud and too busy compared to home. But I didn't care. I checked into a hotel near downtown, opened my laptop, and started searching. Business records, street views, local maps. I made a list of every building connected to that name. By morning, I was parked across the street from a small real estate office with a gold and black sign, Wallace Group Investments. I watched for hours. Around 11:15 a.m., a black SUV pulled up. My breath caught in my throat. The door opened, and there he was.
Adam. Alive.
Wearing a blazer.
Smiling.
Walking like nothing had ever happened. Next to him was a woman in heels and a tan dress. She laughed and touched his arm like they'd been together forever. I froze in the driver's seat. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. He didn't look like someone in hiding. He looked like a businessman. Like a husband, but not mine. I took a photo. Then another. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. For 20 days, I cried like I lost the love of my life. But now I realized I never really knew him at all. I wasn't ready to accept it yet. But deep down, I knew the truth was about to be much worse than I thought. I don't remember how long I sat in the car after seeing him. I couldn't move.
couldn't think.
I kept replaying it in my mind. Adam smiling, standing next to her like nothing had ever happened. Like I was just a name he forgot. He didn't look scared. He didn't even look guilty. He looked happy. I went back to the hotel, locked the door, and cried until my throat burned. Not because I missed him anymore, but because now I knew.
He didn't fall. He didn't die. He left.
And he planned it. The man I thought I married faked his own death and disappeared just to take everything I had. I stared at the will again. The transfers. The business account. All of it. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't grieving a tragedy. I was the victim of a scam. A very personal, very well-planned scam. That night I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A friend of my father's, someone who had helped settle business contracts when I took over the restaurant. I didn't tell him everything on the phone. Just enough. He told me to come back to Sacramento as soon as possible. He had connections. He knew people who worked in real estate fraud and identity theft. I also called my bank and asked for everything. IP logs, access records, login locations. They told me something that made my stomach turn. The transfer requests? They came from Sacramento, 3 days after Adam's death. From my own device. I remembered him once saying, "You don't need to read all the fine print. I already double-checked everything." My chest tightened. Was that when he took my signature? Did he trick me into signing documents I didn't understand? Suddenly, every memory felt tainted. Every laugh. Every promise. I didn't just lose a husband. I lost the version of myself that believed I was loved. But now I wasn't grieving. Not anymore. Now I was ready to fight. He wanted to disappear quietly, to take what was mine and vanish without a trace. But he didn't count on one thing.
Me.
I didn't want to see him again. But I needed to. After I got back to Sacramento, my lawyer connected me with a fraud investigator, someone who had handled cases where property was stolen using forged signatures or fake deaths. At first, I felt strange sitting across from a stranger, telling them that my husband was alive and walking around Atlanta like he hadn't ruined my life.
But they didn't laugh. They didn't doubt me.
They listened. They pulled records, dug into digital trails, traced everything. And when they looked at the will, they said what I'd been afraid to say out loud. This signature placement was most likely tricked out of you. It was slipped into other documents. I sat in silence, remembering a night during our honeymoon. We had wine. Adam handed me a folder, said it was for something minor, something about updating our restaurant paperwork. I signed it without thinking. Because I trusted him. That's when he took everything. It wasn't just about money. He wanted the building, the business, the name. He wanted a life that I built, with him erased from the story. But I wasn't going to let that happen. So we made a plan. We created a fake buyer, someone interested in purchasing the restaurant building through a third party. We knew Adam would be tempted. He'd want to cash out before I made too much noise. Before the walls closed in, a message was sent to his company. Wallace Group. A meeting was arranged. Location: a neutral property office in Atlanta. Time: 3 p.m. Purpose: closing the deal. I flew in the day before. This time I didn't cry. I wore a black blazer and kept my face calm, my voice steady. I sat in the next room, watching through a frosted glass panel as he entered with a folder in hand. My folder. My property. My life. He smiled at the agent, offered a handshake, sat down, and opened the documents like he owned the world. Then the door opened. 2 officers stepped in. "Adam Cruz," one said firmly. "You're under investigation for fraud, identity theft, and falsifying legal documents." His smile dropped. He looked left, then right. Then his eyes met mine through the glass. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I stood. He tried to speak, but no words came out. I didn't say anything. I just watched as they cuffed him and took back what was mine. The courtroom was small, quiet. Nothing like the dramatic trials you see in movies. But for me, it felt like the loudest place in the world. I sat just a few feet away from the man who pretended to love me, then faked his death to take everything I owned. He didn't look so confident now. No blazer, no fake smile, just silence, and a thin lawyer who barely looked him in the eye. The judge asked me to speak. I stood. "My name is Layla Cruz," I said, "and I built my life from scratch. I took over a struggling restaurant after my father died. I worked for years to make it something he'd be proud of." I looked at Adam. I shared everything with my husband. I believed in him. I trusted him. And he used that trust to steal from me, lie to me, and disappear like my life meant nothing. My hands were shaking, but I didn't stop. I thought I lost him to the ocean. I grieved. I blamed myself. But I wasn't grieving a tragedy. I was grieving a trap. The judge nodded, and I sat down. It didn't take long for the court to decide. Adam was charged with multiple counts: fraud, falsifying death documents, identity theft, and property theft.
He would face serious prison time.
And I would get back everything he tried to take: my restaurant, my property title, and my name. But honestly, the real win wasn't legal. It was personal. After the sentencing, I walked out into the sun and took the deepest breath I'd taken in months. I wasn't broken.
I was angry, yes.
I was scarred, sure. But I wasn't destroyed. I rebuilt everything. I reopened the restaurant with a new name, Second Flame. People asked what it meant. I told them, it's what rises when something else tries to burn you down. I started holding small workshops for other businesswomen, just quiet sessions where we talk about contracts, property safety, and how to spot red flags in partnerships, both business and personal. One woman came up to me last week after a session. She said, "I was almost you, but not anymore." And that meant more than any court win. Sometimes I still get questions about Adam. Do you hate him? Would you ever forgive him? My answer? I don't think about him much at all. He wanted to erase me. Instead, I became unforgettable.